Hello everyone. Today in this episode we will talk about the simplest possible way to get you started with your coaching skills at work. The beauty is, it does not require any additional time from you. Well, only if you don't count the 15 minutes to listen to this podcast, I guess. Which I hope you don't see as work. Enjoy!
This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a resource for modern, busy people leaders like you who know that just directing people simply does not work in the long run. We provide focused skill practice and the relevant thinking models, so you will ask better questions and make your team shine. Freshly served to you by IntelliCoach.org from hot and spicy Singapore.
Hello everyone to the 7th episode of the Coaching Leader Podcast. So today is about a very simple way to get you started with your just newly acquired coaching skills at work. So something which I see in many leaders who learned the power of coaching skills in a separate workshop environment is that they show a bit of perfectionism. They want to go back to work and they want to be seen as they can do it right out of the gate. They can produce perfectly deep, wonderful, sharp coaching conversations that last 30 minutes, which transform people around them and which makes them feel accomplished right out of the gate. And what I see is often, it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work out for an executive coach who learns it. And frankly, why would it be different for somebody who is trying to apply it at work? Let's go away from doing things perfectly. Let's rather, follow that old saying, how you eat an elephant. You know that? One small bite at a time. And we'll take the first bite today, which means we want to introduce the idea of coaching in a way that doesn't have to change a lot of things around us. Because if we build on our existing routines and structures, and if we don't have to add a lot of new things into our work life, we are more likely to actually do something with it. And that's really the purpose of this podcast, to introduce you with techniques that you will find very easy to integrate into your daily work life. So let's set this episode up. What are we talking about? What kind of use case are we talking about? I'm talking about the case, for example, when you, as a leader, you sit at your desk and a team member walks up to you. They walk up to you and they interrupt your train of thought, which is fine. They interrupt you and they ask you for your advice. Hey boss, do you have a minute? I'd like to check something with you, please. Or can I get your thought on that? I would be really interested what you think. And at that moment, we believe, we as leaders, we should give answers. And we discussed this in previous episodes. We give answers because we feel it's the right thing to do. It's our job. We are getting paid for it. It's part of our role too. We also want to be helpful. And we might still, at the end, after we told them what we think about it, we might still invite the other person for their opinion. We might say, this is what I would do in this case. What do you think? What's your opinion? And that's very natural. We believe the person has come up to us. Why shouldn't we tell them right away? And also, it feels fast, right? So very likely we tell them right away what comes up to mind for us, and hopefully, in a way, we both get back on our way at work. So the truth is, though, that when we give our advice first, it has potential negative impact. It might be that we give the wrong answer. It might be that the challenge that the person brings in front of us is not their real challenge. Yes, they want your advice, but how can we, in this typical moment, be a bit more coach-like? And the simple solution that I want to propose to you in this short podcast episode is that we simply, in this existing conversation, reverse our pattern. So just now, in this example, we are being asked for advice. What we do is we give our advice first, and then we ask them for their opinion or for their thoughts. What I want us to experiment is to reverse that. Why would we do that? It buys you time, first of all, if you do that. if you ask a question before you give advice. It buys you time to think. And you will learn very likely what the other person has already considered. Because don't forget, if a team member comes up to you, they have thought about it first. They will know you are busy at your desk, and they will have thought about a couple of things, and they are most likely stuck. Unless for some certain characters, people would not want to interrupt you unless it's really necessary. So they have gone through some thinking. So why don't we access that first? So actually there are probably two choices here. If they have thought about options before, then we should access their thinking. Because it saves us both time to think something through which they have already done. If they have not thought about something, then it's high time for that, to be honest. Because we hire people to think for themselves. And this is something we want to instill in our team members. So if you find out after asking them, what do you think? And they say, I don't know, I haven't started yet. Then that's quite a clue for you. Now, in that moment, it might be difficult to stay out of judgment entirely, but it's useful in that moment to share your expectation in the future that people will pre-think before they come to you. Because the first thing I think we all need to do when we are being asked for our advice is to counter our natural impulses, our natural way of sort of our instinct. Because very likely when somebody comes to us, our brain starts rattling right away and comes up with 1, 2, 3 options that we want to share with the person. But in order to sit back and be able to ask a question, we need to interrupt this pattern. And something very simple that I came across is a so-called 4-second rule. And Peter Bragman, B-R-E-G-M-A-N, Bragman, has written actually a book about that. It's called, I think, 4 Seconds. And this is one of those books where the tagline of the book tells you all you need to know. So the tagline of the book is 4 seconds, all the time you need to replace counterproductive habits with ones that really work. Let me save you some time here. The book is a good one, but if you want to know what it's about, it's this. It usually takes 4 seconds for us. It takes 4 seconds of time for our prefrontal cortex to kick in and take over and prevent us from making an instinctive choice. And that instinctive choice might be something we do, might be something we say. If somebody really triggers our buttons at work, taking 4 seconds is often all it takes to regain a bit of control and not lash out right away. And that takes time actually to develop because it's a bit of self-observing. Now that you know that, you will probably, in situations in the future, realize afterwards, I should have taken my 4 seconds. So what works for me is, firstly, being well rested, because that helps for self-control, so getting your sleep. But then, in those moments where you're being tested, take 2 deep breaths. Just wait for your prefrontal cortex to stay or to come back in control. Because whatever has been told to you might be something emotionally, might be something that triggers you. So give yourself a short moment to regain control. And then the first thing that comes out of your mouth should be a question. Should always be a question, because there's value in giving yourself some more time and accessing it. Because when you ask a question, you will basically make sure that the advice that is already ready in your head to be dispensed, that your advice is absolutely laser focused and effective and is exactly what the person in front of you needs. So it is, in effect, a time-saving measure for you to ask a question first. We could start by saying, this is what I heard, what your challenge is. You need advice on X. And then you ask a question, so what do you recommend? Or what have you already considered? What I like personally to do is to mix this together with a clear display of humility. So, for example, in a way that quite a number of things came up to mind for me right away, but I know you're the expert. I'm curious, what do you recommend right out of the gate? And that might be a bit annoying to your team members when you start doing this. But believe me, people learn that. I've started doing this with my own teams a while back, and it has a profound impact. It becomes a habit too for them to expect the question that you will share what your recommendation is, what your opinion is. And the question of what do you recommend is really powerful, because that requires them to really think or have had spent some time to pre-think it. And it requires your team members to take ownership and to take a position, to take a stand. And if they come back to you and say, well, I've considered multiple options here. So I considered option 1 to do this, option 2. And what do you think, boss? Well, in that moment, they have not answered your question yet. So you can say, so I hear these 2 options. So which one do you recommend? And you can be stern to that. And that's really useful, because when the person says then option 1, so okay, what made you choose that option? What's your rationale? And that moment, that can be just a 3 or 4 minute conversation that goes into an area which is really useful. And if these 2 options maybe that your direct report says are, well, not on your map, that's useful to you, right? And you can understand what their value might be. Or in this moment, you switch and say, look, yeah, I've got another idea. Let me share with you. And you switch to an advising, consulting mindset, which is perfectly fine. Because that's where your judgment also comes into place, because you might have different or additional information. But in the end, you are building a much stronger case for the other person to accept your recommendation, your opinion. And you can later on focus on coaching them by asking them, how would you now make it work? What could get in your way? And all that can be just a 5-6 minute short conversation. It might take longer than the normal 3 minutes that you take by simply dispensing with advice. But it is much more likely to have more sustainable effect. One caveat, you would only ask a question first when a team member comes to you if there is no objective right answer. So let's not forget that. We wouldn't coach if there is an objective right way to do it. That way we are just wasting everybody's time. But if the question is something where there might be different opinions, then it's very useful to understand what the other person thinks first. And after the first question, after maybe 1 or 2 questions, you might still decide, is it worth giving my advice now? Or is it worth exploring further what the other person says? Doing this very consistently has another really positive time-saving effect. People will really learn to self-moderate and expect this question from you. Your consistency is key here. People will come to you more prepared. They will ask you questions knowing and having a recommendation in mind. And that is a very different mindset. I've been experiencing this myself as a direct report to my own manager, expecting that I walk up to this person and say, do you think I should approve this? And he would sheepishly sit back in his chair and ask me, so what do you think? What would you do? In that moment, I was dumbstruck in the beginning because I haven't prepared an answer. I was simply used from other managers before that they would tell me what they would think. But in that moment, he said, I'm still here for a while. Just maybe let me know what you think. Think it through for a moment and come back to me in a few minutes. Let's discuss it because I'm really keen to see what you think, he told me. And that was very empowering. And it helped me to regulate myself. And the next time when I had a similar question, should I approve or reject this business request? I realized I can't just walk up to my boss now and ask him this question just because I have no clue. I need to spend a bit of time thinking myself. I need to make a position here, however hard it might be. That was difficult for me, but it also built my ability to think, to pre-think and justify a point. And it would moderate myself in a way that very often I would find the solution myself. And I would go to my boss to say, look, I have this challenge here that I would like to just bounce off with you. I see two options. I would choose the first one and I would confirm whether we are on the same page, whether I might miss anything in terms of my own rationale. And that is a very different kind of conversation to have between manager and employee. It is a relationship where people are on par almost, where they are equals, where people are being brought to think for themselves and provide recommendations. So I hope this is useful, and it requires really nothing else than reordering what you probably already do, to sum it up. Instead of giving your advice first and asking for their opinion later, you do the opposite. You take 4 seconds, you take 2 breaths after you've been asked for advice. 4 seconds, and then you ask a question with pinch of humility and find out what they already have in mind, because I'm sure they have. So I want to ask you again. I want to coach you right away here. I would like you to take out your phone right now. I'll give you a moment. I hope you can think about the kind of meetings that you're having over today or over the next day. Think about a meeting with one or multiple people where you could try this. How could you do this differently in one upcoming meeting? So pick a meeting that is already in your calendar and think about how can you do what we just learned? How can you find a moment where you can take a deep breath and ask a question first before giving any advice? And I will give you again 30 seconds to just think for yourselves from now. So 30 seconds might seem short to some, long to others. If you need more time, of course, you can just pause the podcast. But it is really important that we do this. I would love you to apply this right away in a meeting that comes up next, so that you can help your team members right away. And the second coaching question, there are always two. They always come in two for me. I would like you to think about what could be the positive impact to you if you implemented this little strategy. I repeat, what could be the positive impact to you if you started doing this? If you asked first and then advised. All right, so I hope you have some answers for yourself and you have a little path forward where you can experiment with this. Because all this is about application. And as you can see, it's a very simple method that doesn't require anything else from you. No new meeting, no setting a coaching conversation with anybody yet. Hope it was useful. If you have comments or questions, let me know. I look forward to hearing them. Until then, I wish you great coaching moments and hear you soon. Bye.
You have been listening to the Coaching Leader Podcast, your resource to activate strengths and coaching skills in leaders. Head over to intellicoach.org to check out our blog and offers. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for tuning in.
Hi, thanks for sticking around a little bit longer to the extra part of this podcast where I get a little bit more personal. So it's not part of the main content for a reason. I wanted to give a short update on my personal evolution in producing this podcast. I think very earlier one of the first few podcasts, I shared my difficulty in getting started, and that's very symptomatic for, I believe, most podcasters out there, except for a few really strange talents out there. I'm not one of them. I found it very difficult to get started, and I experimented a lot. But I found now, I've read that it's a good practice to not just produce 1 or 2 podcasts, but maybe a handful before actually going out there and releasing it with a little bit of a bang. And yeah, I'm sort of getting to understand now why. It's been now 7 episodes and the entire process is much easier. And it's really that old saying, you build a routine, beginning is tough, but you chew one bite at a time. I find it's now strangely easy to sit in front of a microphone alone and talk. I somehow hoped I would get to that point, but I never expected it would get there so quickly. So that's quite fascinating to me to realize. So it's been 7 episodes now, and I feel a wonderful kind of learning curve that I'm on. I'm starting to get to that point that I love, where I can start perfecting little things around this podcast. In terms of music, style, post-processing. You've heard that some episodes didn't sound that nicely, and I had some noises there. I'm still working those out, but it's a fun thing to produce it. And I think my eventual goal is to outsource this, or part of the production and post-processing itself. I'm not there yet. Outsourcing to somebody requires also that it's sort of possible to automate. That means it must be documented and repeatable, so forth. And I'm a big fan of Pat Flynn and his Smart Passive Income podcast, and he always shares his fear of outsourcing things because he simply didn't trust anybody to do it as well as he would. I'm in that same trap here. But I believe it can be done and it should be done. So my goal to myself and to everyone out there is that within 6 months, I have this process documented and to some degree outsourced. I look forward to that part, to building and improving every little part of my business. And my business is still on a very rough edge right now. Intellicoach.org. The webpage is, by the way, the main thing that at the moment prevents me from even going live with the podcast. It is not something that I'm very proud of right now. With the webpage, I want to build a good degree of it myself first before I outsource, because it's mostly content and I cannot outsource the content thinking. So very likely when you hear this 7th episode and you listen to this episode while it's just been released, you're part of a very selective few people, because I have not publicly advertised this podcast yet. This is sort of my pre-launch. My plan is to really start in 2019 to publicly reach out and share. If you're already listening to this and you have questions, I would love to build podcast episodes that are focused on your questions. There's a Twitter handle called IntelliCoach that you can get to, and this way you can simply ask me questions and I will be happy to answer them. Find me as IntelliCoach, INTELLI, and my Twitter handle is simply IntelliCoach. I hope that this feeling more natural about podcasting is a very good sign. I'm very happy about it. I want to send a thank you also to Christina, who is my own coach, who helped me really get to that point. of feeling more comfortable. It was a very important coaching topic for myself. And by the way, a very good one, because nobody can tell me how to become more comfortable. I have to build that comfort and that confidence myself. And yeah, I'm really thankful for Christina, who's my coach, to help me unlock that in myself. So with that, it's already 6 minutes of, it feels like aimless rambling. With that, I want to send you off into another week of great work and even more coaching moments. I will talk to you soon again. Bye.